Hey guys, tonight we drift into a story soaked with water lilies, ancient genius, and mud that's much more clever than you'd expect. Picture this. You're standing on the edge of a vast, shimmering lake. The mountains surrounding you are just shadows against the fading sky, and right before you, rising out of the water like some half-submerged mirage, is a city, Tenochtitlan. It's 132.5-ish, give or take a celestial omen. The air smells like fish, smoke, and something faintly sweet. Maybe blooming night cactus, maybe something left in the sun too long. Either way, welcome to the heart of the Aztec world. Now this isn't just any old city, it's a capital literally built in the middle of a lake. There are no roads, just canals, no open fields, just gardens that float. You're here to learn how a civilization fed 250,000 people without a single tractor, and your sneakers will not survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I always love seeing where my sleepy travellers are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across a spongy trail at the edge of Lake Texcoco, trying not to sink ankle-deep in marshy sludge. The water glows with sunset, reflecting a chaotic sky. Giant birds flap overhead. Dragonflies the size of paper planes buzz past. And looming above the reeds are towers. Yes, towers. Built of volcanic stone and topped with bright red flags. You're in the Aztec capital, a city so grand that when the Spanish saw it, they thought they were dreaming. And to be honest, you're kind of wondering if you are too. Here, the lake isn't a barrier. It's the main street, the pantry, the plumbing system, and yes, the farm. The Aztecs knew they couldn't feed a massive urban population using just the little dry land available, so they stared at the swampy shallows and said, "Fine, we'll just grow dinner on top of the water." You board a flat-bottomed canoe, pushed along by a young farmer with shoulders like braided rope. As you drift down the narrow channel, the city hums around you. People laugh from floating platforms. Children chase each other between piles of squash. A woman yells at a dog who just tried to steal her tamale. The farmer nudges you. "See those green patches," he says, pointing with his paddle. "Those are Chinampas. They look like islands. Long rectangular plots floating on the lake surface, anchored somehow so they don't float away. They're bursting with colour. Rows of amaranth, maize, beans, chilies and flowers. But they're not natural. Every inch of that green was built from scratch. Back in the early days, when Tenochtitlan was just a collection of stilt houses and hope, the Aztecs had to invent a new way to grow food. Traditional farming didn't work on soggy, saline land. So they turned to engineering, as you do when you're hungry and clever and there's nowhere left to expand. The earliest Chinampas were simple, floating mats of reeds and aquatic plants, layered with lake mud and compost. Over time, they got more sophisticated. Farmers began driving wooden stakes into the lake bed to outline a rectangular shape, usually about 30 metres long and 2.5 metres wide. Because let's face it, farming is all about the geometry. Inside this frame, they piled up sediment from the lake bottom, mixed it with decaying vegetation, and planted crops directly into this nutrient-rich sponge. The result? A kind of floating garden that never dries out, self-irrigates and regenerates naturally. If your houseplants had unionized and built a utopia, it might look something like this. And yes, historians still argue whether the Chinampas truly floated like rafts, or were always semi-permanent mounds anchored to the shallow lake floor. Honestly, you're more concerned with the fact that they're still more functional than your apartment's balcony garden. The farmer chuckles as you reach out and touch the soil. It's damp, crumbly, alive. Frogs leap between the rows and ducks paddle around the edges like overconfident security guards. It's hard to believe this serene, hyper-efficient farm is part of a metropolis. Yet here you are, floating past it all, your fingers trailing in water that fed an empire. A child calls out from a neighbouring Chinampa, holding up a weirdly lumpy gourd. You wave, and the farmer explains, "We rotate crops to keep the soil healthy. Beans, squash, maize, it's the three sisters." You nod knowingly, even though your only experience with crop rotation involves rearranging your fridge leftovers. Fun fact. The Aztecs also planted flowers, tons of them. Marigolds, dahlias, morning glories, not just for beauty but for rituals, medicine, and allegedly, to win over crushes with strategic bouquet placement. Love in the time of aquaponics, basically. The sun dips lower, a breeze drifts over the water, thick with warmth and the scent of cornmeal. You watch as workers in the distance haul bundles of reeds and scoop algae into buckets. Nothing is wasted here. Even pond scum has a purpose, either as fertilizer, mosquito trap, or soup garnish, depending on your culinary boldness. Your canoe docks at the edge of another Chinampa, and the farmer gestures for you to step out. Your foot sinks into soft earth. It's not quite land, not quite water, just this third thing. A hybrid space engineered by necessity and maintained by daily care. And that's the trick of it. Chinampas aren't a static invention. They're alive. They require maintenance, love, and a lot of early mornings. If you neglect them, they drown. If you push them too far, they crumble. It's a delicate balance, just like everything else the Aztecs built. A heron takes flight nearby, flapping slowly over the canal. Somewhere a flute begins to play, off-key but charming. The farmer grins. First day's free. Tomorrow we teach you to harvest with one hand and swap mosquitoes with the other. And just like that, the lake breathes around you, holding up a city, a farm, a story still floating after 700 years. You wake early to the croaking of frogs and the distant slap of paddles. The fog is thick, curling above the water like steam rising from a dream. You stretch, still a little sore from yesterday's canoe ride, and glance around at your damp surroundings. Chinampas float silently beside you, their dark soil now dotted with a morning dew. Somewhere nearby, someone sneezes, loudly, and curses in Nahuatl. Swamp life, as you're finding out, doesn't come with a mute button. Today you're trudging into the wild fringe of Lake Texcoco, where the land isn't yet land. It's marsh, really. Spongy, unstable, and absolutely determined to ruin your only pair of sandals. You squelch forward, led by an elder gardener who looks like he could arm wrestle a boulder and win. His walking stick is more ceremonial than practical, carved with little frogs and ears of corn. He stops at a soggy clearing and grunts. This is where it begins. You look around, it doesn't seem promising. The ground quivers when you shift your weight, and dragonflies buzz at your ears like gossiping neighbours. Still, the elder explains, this very spot is prime Chinampa making real estate. Because the lake here is shallow, full of nutrients, and too inconvenient for fishing, perfect for transforming into farmland. It's all about reclaiming the unusable. Instead of fighting the swamp, the Aztecs leaned in and said, let's farm it. They used bundles of junco reeds, called zacas, and tied them into tight rafts, stacking them in layers until they floated steadily. These reed rafts form the skeleton of early Chinampas. Picture a giant rectangular lasagna where instead of pasta and cheese, you're layering sticks, leaves and mud that smells like wet socks. Every day, farmers, like the one grunting beside you, dragged up sediment from the lake bottom using wide wooden paddles. That sludge, pure gold. It was filled with decomposed plant matter, fish poop, and who knows what else. But the Aztecs didn't care. It made their plants grow fast, tall and tasty. There's even evidence that lake algae, called spirulina, was harvested for food, sort of an ancient green smoothie, if your blender was a stick and your kitchen counter was a canoe. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs invented this technique entirely on their own, or inherited it from earlier cultures like the Xochimilca. Some say it evolved slowly over centuries. Others believe it was a flash of brilliance sparked by pure swampy desperation. Either way, what matters now is that you're ankle deep in history, elbow deep in mud, and debating whether your tetanus shots are up to date. The elder hands you a woven basket. You fill it with twigs and lakeweed, dumping each bundle into a forming rectangle staked into the shallows. It must breathe, he mutters. Too packed, it sinks. Too loose, it floats away. You nod solemnly, though your main concern is not dropping your basket directly onto your foot again. Mid-morning, a younger farmer joins you, bearing clay cups of atoli, a warm, maize-based drink that tastes like sleepy cereal. You sip, grateful, as the work continues. In the distance, more Chinampas stretch out like a quilt across the water. From above, they look like green stripes. From below, they're a miracle stitched together by thousands of muddy fingers. Once the base is built and the mud layered on top, it's time to wait. A few days, maybe more, until the soil settles. But even as the Chinampa rests, the gardeners don't. They're already cutting more reeds, dredging more muck, building canals around each plot. This isn't a lazy farming method, it's a full-time commitment to aquatic stubbornness. You pause to watch a boy nearby playing with a salamander, an axolotl to be precise. Native to these lakes, these little creatures are adorable in a way that makes biologists squeal, and toddlers name them things like Fluffy. The Aztecs, however, thought they were sacred, possibly even divine. Some versions of the myth say they represent the god Xolotl, who hid in the lake to avoid sacrifice by turning into a salamander. Smart guy. The boy sets the axolotl back into the water with a wink, and it wriggles away with the dignity of a reluctant prophet. By mid-afternoon, your arms are sore, your knees caked in mystery grime, and the Chinampa is nearly done. It's lumpy, uneven, and wobbles slightly when you poke it. But hey, it's floating. That counts. What amazes you more than anything is how nothing is wasted. Dead plants go into the foundation. Algae becomes mulch. Even the stinky gelatinous mats of cyanobacteria are gathered and dried as compost. You're pretty sure this lake could devour a refrigerator and spit it back out as fertilizer. Nearby, two women argue over the best ratio of reeds to mud. One swears by 4-1, the other insists 3-1 gives fluffier tomatoes. This is not a casual debate, it's personal. They speak fast, gesturing with muddy hands and pointing at each other's vegetable plots like sports commentators. You sip more atoli and wisely stay silent. You ask the elder how they know when a Chinampa is ready. He shrugs. It speaks, he says. When the birds come, and the soil stays warm at night, it's ready. You try to imagine your houseplants whispering their readiness, but mostly you just remember the cactus you once overwatered to death. By evening, you're standing on your new floating plot, the lake around you now calm and pink with sunset. Someone lights a cooking fire on a neighbouring Chinampa. You can smell roasted maize and grilled fish wafting over the water. The air vibrates with life. Frogs croaking, birds flapping home, children laughing, someone somewhere playing a drum that clearly has no bedtime. This place shouldn't work. It's too wet, too unstable, too full of inconvenient wildlife. But the Aztecs made it work. With patience, labour, and a deep respect for the land, even if the land floats and tries to suck off your shoes. You lie back on a pile of woven reeds, eyes toward the stars just beginning to blink awake. A water beetle skims across the surface nearby, like a little boat without a captain. Tomorrow you'll plant your first seeds. Tonight you rest. The lake cradles you gently, and the Chinampa holds firm beneath your back, as if it too is learning to trust your weight. The sun peeks over the mountains like it's trying not to wake anyone, just a soft orange glow creeping across the rippling surface of the lake. You sit up on your Chinampa, a little sore, a little muddy, and surprisingly excited. Today's the day you plant. You, the unqualified lake farmer, are about to commit seeds to soil and pretend like you know what you're doing. The elder gardener arrives with a wooden box full of dried seeds. He opens the lid like it's a sacred relic, and honestly it kind of is. Inside are kernels of maize, shiny black beans, tiny specks of amaranth, and the dried pods of chilies that look like miniature scrolls. Each one carries more than nutrition, its lineage, culture, a future taco. Before planting, though, there's ceremony. The elder dips his fingers in lake water and sprinkles a few drops on the soil, murmuring to the earth in Nahuatl. You don't understand the words, but the meaning is clear. Thank you. Please grow. Don't embarrass me. Then, with a stick notched at one end, basically the original gardening trowel, you begin poking holes in the soil. Maize goes first. It's the queen of the field, tall and proud. Every few feet you press a kernel into the ground, like pressing a tiny promise into the earth. Then beans, climbers that will use the maize stalks like jungle gyms, and squash, the low creeper, there to guard the soil like a leafy security system. The three sisters, working in botanical harmony, just like they do in your favourite gardening myths and hipster cookbooks. You move slowly, methodically, letting the rhythm settle your thoughts. The lake laps gently at the edges of the Chinampa, frogs chirp in a far-off chorus, and a pair of ducks argue over something no one else cares about. It's peaceful, meditative, and then a giant beetle lands directly on your shoulder and ruins everything. You squeal. The elder doesn't even look up. Once the planting's done, you help build a barrier along the edges of the Chinampa, a living fence of ahuejote trees, willows that love water. Their roots grow deep and wide, anchoring the floating soil and keeping the Chinampa from dissolving into a very expensive mud puddle. Plus, they provide shade and act like windbreaks. Basically, they're the helpful neighbour who minds their business, but always brings snacks to the block party. Fun fact, Aztec farmers sometimes used human waste as fertiliser. Yep, they even had public latrines where waste was collected and ferried by canoe to be dried, treated and applied to Chinampas. Sanitary. Arguably. Efficient. Incredibly. Historians still argue whether this was common practice or just reserved for the most elite gardens. You, meanwhile, decide not to think too hard about what was in yesterday's squash stew. The elder hands you a gourd cup filled with cool lake water, probably filtered, hopefully, and you sit down to rest under the shade of a young ahuejote. In the distance, other Chinampas buzz with activity. Some farmers are planting, others are harvesting. Children are tying flowers into bundles, likely for market. Everything has purpose. Even the weeds get gathered for animal feed. It's here that the real brilliance of the Chinampa system sinks in, literally and figuratively. The soil stays moist from the water beneath. The air is humid, perfect for fast growth. The layout of the plots, with canals between them, makes irrigation simple and elegant. Just dip a bowl and splash where needed. No complex pipes, no mile-long hoses, no angry HOA fines for lawn water violations. And then there's the travel. You hop back into a canoe to ferry your seed box to another Chinampa. With narrow canals cutting between every plot, it's like a green Venice, but with less gelato and way more corn. The canoe glides silently, pushed along with a pole instead of a paddle. You pass other boats, some full of produce, others with kids napping under shade cloths, one that appears to be a floating taco stand. You make a mental note to visit that one later. Another quirky detail. The Aztecs often planted chempalxochitl, marigolds, not just for decoration, but to repel pests. It turns out bugs hate the smell of marigolds, which makes you wonder why no one's made a candle out of them yet. These bright yellow-orange flowers line the borders of Chinampas, adding bursts of colour and a bit of olfactory sass to the ecosystem. As you paddle, the elder tells you about the lake itself. Lake Texcoco wasn't just one lake, but part of a 5-lake system that once filled the Valley of Mexico. Texcoco was the salty one, briny and unfriendly to fish, but surrounded by freshwater lakes like Xochimilco and Chalco. The Aztecs built dikes to separate the fresh from the salt, keeping their Chinampas nourished and their drinking water, well, drinkable. One of the most famous of these was the Nezahualcoyotl Dike, a massive engineering feat that spanned miles and used volcanic rock, wood and human labour to tame nature. Historians still debate just how effective the dike was long term, especially during floods, but hey, it beat waiting for desalination tech. You arrive at your next floating field and begin planting again. Your motions are smoother now. The sun is higher, the sweat sticks to your skin, and your fingernails are officially beyond saving. But it feels right. Like you're syncing with something ancient and slow and surprisingly patient. Lunch arrives in the form of tamales wrapped in corn husks and a drink called pulque, a slightly fermented, milky liquid made from agave sap. It tastes ambitious. Like if kombucha had a cousin who made questionable decisions. Still, you sip it while dangling your legs over the Chinampa's edge, watching dragonflies skitter over the surface. You ask if anything ever goes wrong out here. The elder nods. Sometimes storms flood the canals, trees fall, ducks eat the seeds, people get lazy. He shrugs. But the land forgives if you return to it. That sticks with you. Maybe it's the drink or the heat or the fact that your phone hasn't buzzed in hours. But the idea that the earth forgives, especially this strange floating patch of it, feels oddly comforting. As the day winds down, you ride back across the canal maze. Shadows grow long and the city hums again in the distance. Tomorrow the seeds might sprout, or they might not. That's farming. But for now, you've taken the first steps into a world where food floats, trees walk, and the soil whispers back. You wake to the sound of water slapping gently against your Chinampa, rhythmic and soft like the lake is breathing. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing a slow, off-key melody while trimming reeds. You stretch beneath a blanket woven from maguey fibres, its rough texture softened by weeks of use. The air smells like damp earth, wet willow, and roasted maize from a breakfast you can already hear sizzling. You pull on your tunic, still crusted with yesterday's garden grime, and step out onto your floating farm. And there it is. Life. Tiny green specks pushing up from the soil. The maize sprouts, bright and eager, have cracked through the surface overnight like they're in a hurry to reach the sun. The beans are shyer, just curling their way upward, and the squash, well, the squash is being dramatic, already spreading wide leaves like a performer taking a bow. You can't help it. You cheer softly. The elder grunts in approval. The earth listened, he says. Then after a pause, try not to kill it. Chinampas require constant maintenance. You don't just plant and nap, you weed. You dredge fresh mud from the canals and spread it in thin layers over the soil to replenish nutrients. You trim your ahuyote trees so they don't shade out your crops. You even chase off particularly smug herons who try to snack on the seedlings. There's no set it and forget it mode out here. To keep everything balanced, you use tlakinoli, burned plant material from the last harvest, mixed with lake silt to create a potent soil blend. The ash balances the lake's natural acidity, and the plants love it. It's the Aztec version of compost tea minus the Pinterest boards. The rhythm of life on the Chinampa settles into your bones. Mornings begin with canoe rides to check the far plots. You lean over the side to pull weeds by hand, your reflection rippling with each movement. Afternoons bring trading boats, floating stalls that move from Chinampa to Chinampa, exchanging produce, tools, gossip, and unsolicited parenting advice. One elderly vendor insists your squash plants are too close together. They'll fight, she warns, like brothers sharing a hammock. And then, in the late afternoon, the rains come. Warm summer rain in the Valley of Mexico isn't a drizzle, it's a downpour. You hear it before you see it. Thunder rumbling like a stone stomach, wind pulling across the lake like a giant inhaling. Then the skies open. You scramble to protect the seedlings, using woven mats to shield the most fragile ones. The elder simply ties his hair up and laughs. Let it fall. We need it. You stand there, soaked to the skin, watching the rain nourish the Chinampas, the lake, the air itself. Everything smells cleaner afterward, like the world pressed a reset button. One of the quirks of this system, flooding is both a blessing and a curse. If the rains are balanced, they recharge the canals and stir up fresh nutrients. If they're excessive, they can drown entire plots. Historians still argue whether Aztec Chinamperos had formal flood control systems, or just relied on dikes and divine luck. You're currently hoping for the latter. In the days that follow, your crops grow tall, almost alarmingly fast. The maize shoots up like bamboo, the beans twist skyward like acrobats, and the squash has taken over a corner of your Chinampa with the swagger of an invasive vine. You've got food on the way, and with it responsibility. Harvest days are festivals in miniature. The community gathers to collect maize ears, pull up beans, twist chilies from their stems. Everyone sings, even if most of them can't carry a tune. You get assigned to squash duty, which feels like being on the losing end of a tug-of-war match against an overconfident vegetable. Still, it's satisfying. Every pluck of a ripe bean, every sweet red chili in your basket, feels like evidence that the land accepted your offering and gave something back. You carry your harvest to the market canal where boats line up like a floating swap meet. Merchants balance precariously on narrow vessels, offering feathers, obsidian tools, cacao beans, and steaming tamales in exchange for fresh produce. You trade your squash for a clay cup carved with frogs, and then your beans for a small flute made of bone that makes a terrible sound when you try it, but delights a passing child. Chinampa-grown produce is prized. The soil is rich, the water constant, and the microclimate around the lake means these crops often grow bigger, sweeter, and faster than their dryland cousins. Some historians believe this system may have produced up to 7 harvests a year in certain crops. Others argue that claim's a bit romanticised, probably more like 4 or 5. Still, even 4 harvests is enough to make you feel like an agricultural wizard. At night you gather with others around a cooking fire. Someone grills fish wrapped in leaves. A woman hands you a warm tortilla dusted with salt and lime. The stars shimmer on the lake's surface, and the hum of life continues. Frogs, crickets, the occasional splash of something definitely too big to be a fish. You ask the elder what it was. "Zolotl, probably," he says with a grin. "Still hiding." You can't tell if he's joking. You hope so. You've heard stories now. Legends passed down about how the gods created this lake to test humanity, how the floating gardens were built not just to grow food, but to show respect to the land and water spirits. One tale claims that the lake demands a gift each year, a bundle of maize, or a carved figurine, dropped into the depths to keep the waters calm. Another says that a chinampa left untended for too long will drift into the fog and vanish forever, swallowed by the lake's memory. The elder says that's nonsense, but you still catch him whispering to the soil as he plants the next seed. You begin to notice that each chinampa has a personality, some calm and orderly, others wild and overgrown like botanical jazz. The one near the willows hums with bees and birds. Another, shaded by ancient ahuejote trunks, grows mushrooms in little pockets of cool shadow. Your favourite plot, though, is one no one else seems to want. It's crooked, overrun with marigolds, and has a perfectly round rock in the centre like a forgotten altar. You name it plot that tries its best. Every morning you canoe out with tools made from obsidian and bone, sharpened blades that gleam in the sun like they're about to co-star in a sacrificial drama. But today, your job isn't planting or harvesting, it's maintenance, and maintenance means dredging. You balance precariously at the Chinampa's edge, leaning over with a long-handled basket called an akali. You plunge it into the canal, scoop up dark, mucky sediment from the lake bed, and sling it up onto the Chinampa. It's heavier than it looks, thick with decaying plant matter and, hopefully, nutrients. The idea is simple. Recycle the richness of the lake to nourish the land. But after 10 scoops, you're starting to think the real reason for this task is character development. The elder, effortlessly working on his own plot, chuckles. "The mud makes you strong," he says, "and smelly." You smear the mud into a thin, even layer, mixing in leftover plant stalks and ash from yesterday's cook fire. The texture is strange, like warm cake batter with a grudge, but the soil loves it. You can already see the earthworms wriggling in approval. That's part of the genius here. The system is endlessly renewable. The plants feed the people, the scraps feed the soil, and the soil in turn feeds the next generation of crops. Nothing is wasted. Not even you, as it turns out after falling face first into the canal during a particularly ambitious scoop. You emerge dripping, your dignity floating somewhere near the duckweed. The elder hands you a gourd of pulque and mutters something about baptism. Historians still argue whether Chinampas are truly floating, or just resting atop stakes driven into the lake bed. Some believe the oldest ones were tethered in place with rock anchors and living willow roots. Others suggest the earliest Chinampas actually drifted until they settled into semi-fixed positions, growing stable only as their tree borders matured. Either way, you now believe the answer lies somewhere between engineering marvel and lake monster's dinner tray. Midday brings a surprise visitor, a priest from Tenochtitlan, dressed in dark robes and carrying a staff carved with maize symbols. He's not here for blessings or burials, he's here to collect tribute. The Aztec tribute system is famous or infamous, depending on your role in it. Provinces and conquered cities sent food, cloth, jade, feathers, and more to the capital, like taxes, but with more bird costumes. Chinamperos, even those far from the urban centre, were expected to contribute their share. Usually that meant produce: maize, chilies, beans, flowers. You watch as the elder presents baskets of food. The priest nods solemnly, then lifts a single ear of maize and inspects it like a jeweller. "Good," he declares. "The gods are pleased." You're not sure if that's a compliment or a veiled threat. Either way, the tribute is loaded onto a canoe and paddled away, destined for the temples and markets of Tenochtitlan. You wave goodbye to your squash, whispering a soft, "Make me proud." Later, you ask the elder about the city. He describes it with a gleam in his eye: great temples that scrape the sky, streets of white stone, gardens that hang like green waterfalls, and canals that make it feel like the city floats as much as the Chinampas do. Tenochtitlan, he says, is both heart and stomach, where faith and food meet. He also tells you about the Tlatelolco market, where tens of thousands gather to trade, a place where you can buy jaguar pelts, cacao, gold nose rings, or a parrot that curses in 4 languages. Some scholars argue that this marketplace was the most sophisticated of its time, rivaling anything in Europe or Asia. Others say those claims are exaggerated, romanticized by Spanish accounts that couldn't believe an uncivilized people built such wonders. You, having now eaten tacos mid-canoe, lean toward Team Sophisticated. By late afternoon, the lake reflects golden light, and the Chinampas buzz with low, sleepy energy. Children chase each other between plots, shrieking with joy until someone yells about the beans. A woman strings marigolds into garlands for the temple. A man carves a flute from a stalk of dried maize. Life here is both simple and dazzling. You spot something floating in the canal, a bundle wrapped in cloth. You paddle over cautiously and lift it from the water. Inside are dried chilies, a carved obsidian figure of a frog, and a tiny painted skull. The elder sees your confusion. "Offerings," he says. "Some for the water spirits, some for lost loved ones. We send them down the canals when we can't visit the temples." It's beautiful and eerie, a floating memory. You release the bundle back into the water and watch it drift away. Around you, the lake shimmers. You think about all the hands that have planted in this soil, all the feet that have walked these narrow plots, all the songs sung to the maize, and suddenly, your plot that tries its best feels like something sacred. As evening settles, fireflies dance over the canal. You sit beneath your willow tree, a bowl of beans in your lap, and a sun-warmed tortilla in hand. The elder is telling a story about a fisherman who married a water goddess, but you're only half listening. You're thinking about how, just days ago, you couldn't tell maize from millet. Now you know the feel of rich lake mud between your fingers, the weight of beans in a damp basket, the joy of a sprout pushing free, and you're starting to believe the Chinampa listens. Or at least it tolerates you. You wake up with sore arms, dried mud on your cheek, and a strange feeling in your ribs, like pride mixed with mild dehydration. The Chinampa rustles awake around you. Frogs plop into the canal like soggy punctuation marks, and water birds trill from the branches above. Plot that tries its best is still there, basking in early sunlight, flaunting a new bean sprout like it's showing off a tattoo. You stretch, crack your back, and reach for the morning gourd of atole, a thick corn drink that tastes like someone tried to combine breakfast and a nap. It's warm, sweet, and absolutely the fuel you need. Today is market day. Market day isn't just an errand, it's an event. You load your canoe with baskets of produce, shiny chilies, bundles of beans, ears of maize stacked like golden logs. Someone adds flowers, because even serious Aztec commerce comes with decoration, and you set off down the canal toward the nearest dock, where the market boats congregate like chatty ducks. You paddle slowly because the scenery insists on being noticed. The lake is mirror still, reflecting every tree and cloud with smug precision. Dragonflies zigzag over the surface like indecisive fairies. You spot another farmer, old woman, big hat, rowing with her knees while weaving a garland. You nod. She nods. Neither of you speaks because it's too early for language. The market floats into view like a sudden city. Canoes tied together form a buzzing island. Goods overflow. Fruit pyramids, feather fans, clay whistles, smoked fish, woven mats, obsidian blades, corn tamales, and exactly one goat looking highly displeased. You find a spot to dock, tie your boat with a reed rope, and become a merchant. You quickly discover the art of the trade involves smiling, exaggerating, and not looking too desperate. Your beans are especially lucky. Your chilies are known to make warriors cry. Your maize is recommended by priests and one very picky jaguar. Trade is brisk. You swap chilies for salt, maize for cloth, beans for a surprisingly detailed frog figurine that you probably didn't need, but definitely wanted. The frog is painted green, fanged, and wearing what appears to be a crown. You place it proudly at the front of your boat. The elder gives you a look that says, "You're not ready for responsibility, but I admire your ambition." Overheard gossip tells you that Tenochtitlan is preparing for a festival, the feast of Huitzilopochtli, the war and sun god. That means bigger tribute demands, more temple rituals, and probably a lot of flower garlands. You consider growing more marigolds, but the last time you tried, they took over everything, and your beans got jealous. The young woman selling pottery explains that her family lives on the southern Chinampas. She describes her plot as the quiet one, near the drowned tree. You ask if that's real or metaphorical. She just smiles and sells you a tiny cup shaped like a duck. You have no idea what you'll do with it, but it feels essential. A priest passes by, checking baskets for quality, and ensuring everyone is, as he says, in the favour of the gods. He eyes your frog figurine, nods approvingly, and moves on. This is the Aztec equivalent of Yelp giving you 5 stars. Back at your plot, the day's sun is high and hot. You set to work improving the canals, pulling out debris, trimming the edges with a long obsidian knife, even planting a few new willows at the corner for future anchoring. The water ripples under your canoe, occasionally disturbed by something that might be a fish or might be the lake spirit checking in on your progress. Historians still debate how organised the Chinampa layout was. Some claim it was a centrally planned marvel, gridded and managed by priests and city officials. Others argue it evolved more organically, shaped by individual farmers, local needs, and arguments over who borrowed whose paddle. Either way, you now understand that maintaining a Chinampa is less about maps and more about listening to the soil, to the lake, to your own aching legs. You try singing to your plants. The elder says some Chinamperos use songs to encourage growth, or maybe just to stay awake during weeding. You go for a chant with lots of vowels. Your squash looks confused but intrigued. Your bean plant actually leans toward you. You decide to call that a win. In the heat of the afternoon, you retreat to the shade of your ahuejote. Its long, thin leaves whisper constantly in the wind, like it's spilling secrets. You close your eyes, listening to the murmur of the lake, the creak of distant canoes, and the rhythmic slap of a woman nearby washing clothes in the canal. The wet fabric sounds like applause. You assume it's for you. Then, a splash. You jolt upright. Something just dove near your plot. You peer into the murky water and catch a glimpse of a long, pale shape disappearing beneath the surface. The elder wanders over. "Axolotl," he mutters. "Good luck if it's curious. Bad luck if it's angry." Is that based on science? Number on being bitten. The axolotl, Mexico's infamous walking fish, lives in these lakes. It regenerates limbs, breathes through gills, and looks like it knows something you don't. You resolve to leave out a small chili offering tomorrow, just in case. Evening brings soft orange light and cooler air. You share roasted maize and bean stew with neighbours. A boy plays a flute terribly, until someone bribes him to stop with a tamale. Fireflies arrive like flickering gossip. The stars reflect in the canal until it's hard to tell which way is up. You drift off in your hammock, frog figurine tucked beside you, head full of dreams about axolotls wearing crowns and bean plants dancing in circles. The Chinampa creaks gently beneath you, safe and alive. The lake whispers old stories in your ear, stories of drowned temples, floating gardens, and gods who once walked on water. You murmur back, half asleep, "Try your best, plot." and Plot, in the soft language of rustling leaves, seems to whisper, "I always do." The morning haze lifts off the lake like steam from a giant cup of tea. You rise with a grunt, brush dried flower petals off your tunic, why are there always petals, and squint at the horizon. Something feels different today. There's a breeze from the east carrying the scent of sweet maize and something more metallic. Ceremonial. That's when the elder tells you the festival is near. The Feast of Huitzilopochtli is not the kind of festival where you just show up with guacamole. It's a high-stakes, all-hands-on-deck kind of celebration. Entire communities prep for days, offerings, rituals, dancing, crafting ceremonial foods, and for some unlucky souls, volunteering to impersonate gods. You're not sure how the casting call works, but you're praying your bean-growing skills don't land you in the running. Today, though, you're on flower duty. The Chinampas are famous not just for feeding bellies, but for feeding temples and traditions. Marigolds, dahlias, and Sempolkshitl grow in such lush profusion here that entire floating plots are set aside just for blooms. You paddle over to one, where the air smells like sunshine and honey. The gardener, a wiry woman with more bracelets than sense, gives you a once-over. "You have harvest hands," she says, "and clumsy elbows." She's not wrong. Your first attempt at snipping a flower results in decapitation of 3 blossoms and your dignity. Eventually you find your rhythm, working with obsidian shears and woven baskets, gathering mounds of orange and yellow petals like you're preparing a royal wedding for hummingbirds. Fun fact, historians believe that flower production in Chinampas rivaled even food crops in importance, especially during festival seasons. Some Chinamperos specialized in decorative plants, supplying the city's noble class and temples. There's even evidence of early hybridization. Aztec horticulturists intentionally crossbred flowers to create bolder colors or more potent scents. That's right. You're basically a botanical DJ. Back at your own plot, the elder is preparing maize dough for tamales. But these aren't your average Wednesday night tamales. These are for the gods. That means extra steps, extra prayers, and, most intimidatingly, shaping them to resemble birds and jaguars. You try making one that looks like a maize god, but it ends up resembling a confused potato with wings. The elder gently removes it from your hands and says, "Let's call this one a backup." You decide to go forage instead. The surrounding Chinampas hide all sorts of treasures: chaya leaves, amaranth, wild mushrooms and edible flowers. As you collect them, you think about how clever the Aztecs were at turning every corner of nature into dinner, or a ritual, or both. You remember a story the elder told, of a Chinampero who planted secret herbs that only grew under moonlight, supposedly guided by dreams. He claimed they helped him see the future, or at least predict when it was going to rain. Historians still argue whether such tales reflect actual horticultural knowledge, or just really convincing hallucinations. Either way, you now give every new plant a wary side-eye. As the day wears on, preparations ramp up. A boy arrives with a bundle of copal, a sacred incense used in rituals. You help him set up the burners, clay dishes that look like open-mouthed frogs. When lit, the copal smoke rises in thick, sweet coils swirling around your face and making your brain feel like it's doing Tai Chi. That night you witness your first full festival rehearsal. A priest in brilliant feathered robes stands at the edge of the Chinampa, chanting in a rhythm that syncs with your heartbeat. Drummers on canoes provide a slow, thunderous background. Women dance in circles with flower garlands, tossing petals into the water, which glows silver under the moonlight. The entire lake seems to breathe. You notice something else too, how the Chinampas are connected not just by water, but by culture, ritual, memory. Every person you've met here has a role, a purpose. The woman who grows only blue corn, the man who makes ink from lake algae, the child who weaves tiny frogs from reeds and leaves them as gifts on strangers' plots. It's all part of a living system. Farming, yes, but also art, devotion, history. You look at your own plot. Plot that tries its best has come a long way. The maize is tall now. The beans climb confidently. Even your marigolds have stopped falling over. You sit on the edge, feet dangling in the canal, and feel proud, which is exactly when a passing canoe splashes you. The rower yells, "Sorry!" and throws you a tamale in apology. You forgive him instantly. Tamale diplomacy works wonders. The night ends with quiet. No talking, just the gentle creak of wood, the rustle of leaves, and distant flute music. You lie in your hammock under a blanket that smells faintly of ash and marigold. You watch the stars shift above you, reflected perfectly in the canal below. Historians still puzzle over how the Aztecs coordinated these massive festivals across such a decentralized system. Some believe the priesthood was highly organized, issuing calendars and quotas. Others suggest the festival spirit was so deeply embedded in community life that people just knew what to do, like muscle memory on a civilizational scale. You think it's both, structure and soul, rules and rhythm, like a Chinampa. And just as you start drifting into sleep, you feel a gentle bump beneath your hammock. You glance over the edge. It's your frog figurine. Move 2 inches closer. You're pretty sure you didn't touch it. You whisper, "Good work today, Your Highness." The frog says nothing, but the stars above him twinkle like approval. Morning arrives gently, carried in by the soft gurgle of the canal and the lazy flap of a heron's wings overhead. You sit up slowly, bones creaking like an old canoe, and stretch beneath the branches of your willow. Plot that tries its best is already basking in golden light, and for a brief moment, you swear your squash blossoms wink at you. Today is festival day. The feast of Huitzilopochtli doesn't creep in. It roars, even here on the sleepy Chinampas. From the direction of Tenochtitlan comes the deep throb of drums, growing louder with every heartbeat. Even the water seems to shiver. You pack your canoe with offerings, bundles of maize, woven mats, tamales, including one you shaped to resemble a very abstract jaguar, and a garland of marigolds so large it nearly swallows your paddle. As you make your way toward the city, you join a floating procession, canoes gliding silently through the morning mist, each piled with goods and colour. One vessel has nothing but fish and feathers, another is covered entirely in blue-dyed cloth. The air smells like smoke and flowers and something sweet that could either be incense or overly enthusiastic honey. By the time you reach the outskirts of Tenochtitlan, the lake is a grid of floating offerings and ceremonial traffic jams. You nudge your canoe into a designated docking bay. Basically a cluster of poles that tell you, yes, this is legal parking, and step into a crowd so dense it feels like wading through maize dough. The great causeways are already thrumming with life. Women carry baskets on their heads, men paint symbols on walls, children scamper underfoot with half-eaten tamales. Overhead, banners flap in the wind, bright as bird wings. You pause to watch a group of dancers practicing their steps, bare feet stomping on wooden platforms, arms raised, faces painted with sun motifs. One young dancer accidentally kicks a drum. The priest watching winces but says nothing. Even gods, you suspect, allow for nerves. You follow the crowd toward the Templo Mayor, the heart of the city and the stage for the day's events. Along the way you pass more Chinamperos like yourself, each wide-eyed and a little overwhelmed. You exchange nods and nervous grins. One whispers, "I forgot my second offering." Another says, "I brought a duck." You're not sure if that's brilliant or insane. You place your offerings at the designated platform, lining them up with care. Your frog figurine gets a place of honour, centre stage, nestled among marigolds. An official wearing a cape made entirely of quetzal feathers inspects your tamales and gives you a thumbs up. You breathe a sigh of relief. You may not be a priest, a warrior, or a noble, but today your plot and your efforts matter. The main ceremony begins. Drums, flutes, chants, the kind of sound that reaches into your chest and rearranges your organs. The high priest, robed in brilliant reds and blues, appears at the top of the temple steps. He begins the sacred chants, invoking Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war. The crowd quiets. Even the breeze seems to pause. Historians still debate the exact order of events in these festivals. Some claim elaborate multi-day sequences involving fire, blood, music, and symbolic battles. Others argue for more community-focused rituals with feasting, dancing, and theatrical reenactments. What they all agree on? It was a sensory overload. From where you stand, it's like stepping into a living myth. Painted warriors perform mock battles below the temple. Musicians line the plaza, keeping perfect rhythm. Priests move in synchronized formations, casting copal smoke into the air. You're not sure what's more powerful, the spectacle or the fact that you are part of it. You catch sight of a boy dressed as Huitzilopochtli himself. Turquoise headdress, golden shield, stern expression that cracks when he spots a friend in the crowd and sticks out his tongue. Divine dignity has limits. You spend the rest of the day moving through waves of activity. You eat pozole, a soupy maize drink that tastes better than it looks, and share roasted squash with a family from the northern lakes. You watch dancers perform with obsidian blades and flower garlands, twirling dangerously close to each other. You make a mental note: never dance with sharp objects. Then comes the sky ritual. At sunset, the crowd gathers by the lake's edge. A large raft is floated into view, bearing symbolic offerings, burning incense, carved masks, feathered effigies. As it drifts out onto the water, priests light torches all around the shore. The reflection turns the lake into a second sky, stars above, stars below. Everyone goes quiet. You don't understand every word of the chant, but you don't need to. The rhythm, the setting sun, the flames, they tell you enough. This isn't just spectacle, it's connection. To the gods, to each other, to the land and water that feed you. The Chinampas aren't farms, they're prayers you live on. And then, laughter. A child, emboldened by sugar or mischief, lets loose a painted duck into the canal. It quacks authoritatively and swims straight toward the ceremonial raft. The crowd erupts. Even the high priest chuckles. The duck becomes part of the ritual, the night's unofficial trickster. As stars fill the sky, you return to your canoe. You row slowly, the night calm and soft like everything is wrapped in velvet. The lake accepts you again, folding you into its surface. Fireflies bob alongside you. Somewhere, a distant drum still beats, fading into your thoughts. Back on plot that tries its best, you light a small candle and set it beside the frog. You whisper, "We did all right." The frog doesn't answer, but the wind through the reeds hums approval. You lie down in your hammock, festival smoke still clinging to your skin. The stars overhead shine like a blessing. Below, the water laps gently at your plot's edge, carrying stories and dreams. Tomorrow there will be weeds again. Mosquitoes. Maybe a jealous axolotl. But tonight, you float. By dawn, the festival haze has drifted off, replaced by the quiet hum of daily life resuming. Tenochtitlan, though still sparkling with leftover garlands and half-spent incense, shifts back into gear like a market vendor with a strong espresso. You too drift back to plot that tries its best, which greets you with a soggy welcome mat and one mildly offended heron. You find your squash vines sulking, as if jealous they weren't invited to the festivities. The marigolds somehow have multiplied. You blink at them suspiciously. Either you planted more in your sleep or that frog figurine is up to something. It's time to return to the other rhythm of Chinampa life. Trade. See, growing food is only half the equation. You've got goods, others need them. And in the market system of the Aztec world, your humble plot can be your ticket to a decent living. So, you gather your best crops. Fat tomatoes, striped beans, one particularly arrogant-looking gourd, and load up your canoe. It's market day. You paddle toward Tlatelolco, the grand marketplace of the empire. Even from a distance, the sound carries over the water. Chants, arguments, laughter, a guy shouting dramatically about squash prices. When you finally dock, the scale of it knocks the breath from your lungs. Tlatelolco is a beast of a place. Historians estimate it could hold up to 60,000 people on a busy day. Picture that many humans in one place, all trying to buy or sell things at the same time. You can't move 5 steps without seeing something amazing. Obsidian knives, woven capes, piles of chili sorted by heat level, a man selling parrots, another man dressed as a parrot but no clear motive. You set up your stall on a reed mat, displaying your goods with pride. Next to you is a woman selling freshwater snails. She smiles and offers you one as a snack. You politely decline, not because you're squeamish, but because the snail looks personally offended to be involved. Trade in the Aztec world runs on a currency system involving cacao beans, cotton cloth and small copper bells. You've got a pouch of cacao, just enough to pick up essentials. A friendly trader swaps you dried amaranth for some of your tomatoes. Another offers painted gourds in exchange for your blue maize. One enthusiastic gentleman tries to sell you a nearly trained monkey. You opt for honey instead. Among all the noise and colour, one thing stands out. The merchants, the Pochteca. These aren't your average stall runners. They're elite long-distance traders who travel the empire and beyond to bring back luxury goods. Jaguars, jade, tropical birds, even gossip. Lots and lots of gossip. You overhear one say, "The Mixtecs are painting scandalous murals again." You don't even know the Mixtecs, but now you're dying to see those murals. Historians still argue whether the Pochteca had more political power than they let on. Some suggest they doubled as spies, collecting intel during their trade routes. Others think they simply knew how to market themselves. You suspect both are true. Never underestimate a man who can sell obsidian mirrors and secrets at the same time. Back at your stall, a curious boy points at your frog figurine, which you've brought along for luck. You tell him it brings good harvests. His eyes widen, and 5 minutes later he returns with 2 tamales and a feather for a trade. The frog's smugness intensifies. After a few hours you've traded most of your produce. Your canoe now holds dried fruits, smoked fish, some cotton thread, and a suspiciously heavy sack labelled "Very Important Pebbles." You don't remember agreeing to that one. On your way out, you pass the bartering section. No cacao, no currency, just direct trades. A man is swapping obsidian blades for turkey feathers. Another offers woven sandals for a kiss on the cheek. You pick up a tiny flute carved like a lizard. The seller says it sings when it likes you. You blow into it. It wheezes like a sick toad. The seller shrugs. It'll warm up. As you paddle back, you feel the weight of the day settle into your shoulders. Not just the physical kind, but the kind that reminds you you're part of a vast machine. Your floating garden feeds people. Your flowers bless temples. Your beans turn into someone else's comfort food. The Chinampas might look like isolated plots, but they're deeply wired into the empire's heart. You remember a fringe theory the elder once shared, how the markets were so synchronized with Chinampa rhythms that shifts in planting patterns predicted economic booms and busts. Some even claim the priests consulted lake harvest cycles to plan rituals and political decisions. Historians scoff at this, mostly because it makes farmers sound like wizards. You like it though. It means you matter. Back on your plot, you unpack your goods. You set the smoked fish aside for later, hang the cotton thread by the hammock, and place the frog figurine next to the lizard flute. They stare at each other like dueling mascots. Night falls. You're exhausted but full of food, of stories, of new market smells you're not sure will ever wash off. The wind rustles your maize leaves like applause. Somewhere in the distance, a trader sings a song about lost cacao and a lovesick parrot. You lie back in your hammock and let it all blur together. The drum beats from yesterday, the marketplace madness, the taste of honey tamales, and the echo of a flute that still doesn't like you. Tomorrow the lake will ask for your hands again, but for now the stars say, rest. Dawn creeps over the lake, brushing your face with soft pink light and the smell of damp earth. You wake with a start. No, not from a bad dream, but because the mosquitoes have discovered you again. You slap at the air and grumble, thinking that if there's an Aztec version of a mosquito swatter, you definitely want one. The day's mission is clear. Maintenance. Chinampas, as magical as they seem floating there on the water, are high maintenance. You push off from your plot, paddle slicing through the still lake, heading for the narrow canals between the neighbouring gardens. It's time for the weed battle. Weeds are a perennial problem, growing faster than you can say obsidian blade. They choke your maize stalks, strangle your squash, and make the frogs grumble in the reeds. You lean over the edge of your canoe with a sharp wooden tool and start hacking away. It's tedious work, made more bearable by the chorus of croaking frogs and distant laughter from other Chinamperos. You pause when a particularly aggressive patch of water hyacinth floats by, its purple flowers taunting you. These invasive plants don't belong here. but they've become surprisingly resilient. Some local lore says they were gifts from the gods to test the farmers' patience. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs considered these plants nuisances or sacred symbols of resilience. Nearby, a flock of ducks swims by, one diving beneath the water and emerging with a fat, shimmering fish. You wonder if they've cracked some secret fishing code you missed. They look at you as if to say, "It's not about the weeds, friend. It's about adapting." Maintenance isn't just about plants. You check the reed walls that keep your plot afloat. Over time, they weaken, soaked by sun and rain. You tie fresh bundles, weaving them tightly as your ancestors taught you. The smell of wet reeds and earth rises, grounding you. While you work, you overhear gossip drifting from other plots. Someone spotted a rare axolotl near the market canal. Another is complaining about the latest tax on fish. There's talk of a new temple in the city, bigger and brighter than the Templo Mayor. The information flows like the lake itself, constant and vital. Midday heat presses down, making the work slow and sticky. You wipe sweat from your brow and reach for your water gourd. The cool liquid revives you, but the sun still beats relentlessly. You find refuge beneath a large willow whose branches dip into the water, creating a shady nook. Here you notice something strange. A small bundle tied to a branch, decorated with feathers and beads. It looks like an offering, but to what? Nearby reeds rustle suspiciously. You consider asking a priest, but decide some mysteries are best left to the lake. You recall a fringe belief from a trader. Some Chinamperos secretly practice small-scale rituals daily, whispering to their plots for luck and protection. Others thought these were just superstitions. Historians still debate how widespread these practices really were. You decide you like the idea. It fits with the frog figurine and your hummingbirds. Afternoon creeps toward evening as you finish clearing weeds and repairing walls. Your back aches, but the sight of your plot restored fills you with quiet pride. The maize stands straighter, the squash vines breathe easier, and the marigolds seem to smile. Before heading back to your hammock, you scatter a handful of crushed leaves near the water's edge, a natural mosquito repellent passed down through generations. The scent is pungent, but strangely comforting. You settle in for the night, letting the cool lake breeze lull you. Somewhere nearby, a heron calls. You think about the delicate balance you maintain here, between water and earth, growth and decay, tradition and change. As you drift towards sleep, you hum a tune you heard at the festival, a song about patience and perseverance. It feels fitting. Tomorrow, you know, the lake will call you again. You awaken to the faint glimmer of dawn peeking through the cottonwood branches. The lake wrapped in a gentle mist that makes everything look like a dream painted in soft pastels. The air is cool and smells faintly of wet earth and mossy stones, the scent that settles after a night of gentle rain. Your canoe is waiting patiently by the shore, just like always. Today your task feels a bit different. It's not just about tending to your own plot, but connecting with the wider network of Chinampas. You're heading to the floating gardens of Xochimilco, a sprawling aquatic labyrinth where some of the most innovative gardeners work their magic. You push off, your paddle cutting silently through the glassy water. The lake is calm, the surface dotted with small ripples as fish break through to chase insects, and dragonflies dart overhead like living jewels. You breathe deeply, the cool air filling your lungs and chasing away the lingering sleep. Xochimilco's Chinampas are renowned for their lushness and clever design. Unlike your small plot, these gardens are tightly packed, arranged like patchwork quilts that float atop the water. You notice the intricate system of canals that keep water flowing, preventing stagnation and flooding, a living plumbing network centuries ahead of its time. The gardeners here practice polyculture. Maize, beans, squash, chilies, and even flowers grow side by side. It's a method that maximizes soil health and deters pests naturally. You admire the interwoven patterns of plant life, the green tapestry shimmering under the morning sun. A gardener waves you over, a smile creasing his sun-baked face. He offers you a cup of atole, a warm maize drink flavoured with cinnamon and honey. You accept gratefully, savouring the thick sweetness that reminds you of the home. He tells you about a recent experiment, growing amaranth on floating beds alongside the usual crops. Amaranth seeds are tiny but packed with nutrients, and the plant's resilience could make it a game changer for feeding the city. You nod, intrigued. Change is constant even in these ancient waters. Nearby, a cluster of hummingbirds buzzes around brightly coloured flowers. You watch as one pauses mid-air, wings a blur, and dips its long beak into a blossom. The tiny birds are a favourite subject of local folklore. Messengers between worlds, some say. Historians still argue whether these beliefs influenced agricultural practices or were simply poetic ways to honour nature. While the gardener talks, you notice something else. Small stone statues tucked between plants, worn smooth by water and time. They depict frogs, turtles, and even tiny crocodiles. These aren't just decorations, they're protective symbols, guardians of the crops and water. You ask about one frog statue that looks remarkably like your own figurine back home. The gardener chuckles and explains that frogs symbolise fertility and transformation in their culture. Placing a frog nearby is like asking the earth for a helping hand. As the sun climbs higher, the gardeners gather in a communal space, sharing stories, seeds, and advice. It's a living classroom, passed down through generations. You join them, swapping your own tales of plot that tries its best and the cheeky duck from the festival. Between the chatter, you learn about the ongoing challenges, invasive species, fluctuating water levels, and political pressures from the growing city. You hear whispers of a debate among scholars about whether Chinampas could survive in a modern metropolis without drastic changes. Some say the ancient techniques are too delicate, others argue they're adaptable, even vital. You watch the interplay of history and innovation, the old ways merging with new ideas like vines climbing together toward the sun. Before leaving, the gardener hands you a small bundle of seeds, amaranth, maize, and something you can't quite identify. For your plot, he says, a gift from Xochimilco. You tuck the seeds into your bag, feeling a quiet thrill. Tomorrow you'll plant them on plot that tries its best, weaving new threads into an ancient tapestry. As you paddle back, the wind carries a distant song, soft, hopeful, and unmistakably alive. The next morning you rise early, still feeling the warmth of the atoll from the day before lingering in your belly. The sun is just a promise on the horizon, and the lake is calm like glass ready to catch a painted sunrise. Today you decide is the day to plant those new seeds from Xochimilco on your patch, the small rebellion of new life amid centuries-old soil. You gather your tools, simple wooden sticks, a sharp obsidian blade, and a basket woven tight enough to keep even the smallest seed from escaping. The air smells faintly of wet leaves and the crisp tang of maize husks. As you work, your fingers move with practiced ease, planting each seed at just the right depth, spacing them in rows that feel both ancient and personal. Planting isn't just about getting seeds in the dirt. It's a ceremony, a conversation with the land and water. You whisper blessings, some borrowed from the old stories, some improvised with a sleepy smile, and pat the earth as if it might listen. Your frog figurine watches from its usual spot, seeming more pleased than ever. Nearby, a couple of hummingbirds zoom past, their iridescent feathers catching the early light. You watch one settle on a nearby branch, its tiny chest puffed out as if it's proud of your planting efforts. Maybe it is. Maybe the birds have formed a secret Chinampa cheer squad. Once the new plants are nestled safely in the soil, you take a moment to observe your plot. The marigolds have multiplied again, golden and bright like tiny suns. The maize stalks sway gently, and the beans curl up their poles with youthful enthusiasm. Everything seems to hum with life, and you feel for a moment part of something timeless. Your thoughts wander to the incredible engineering behind Chinampas, how the Aztecs layered mud, sediment, and organic matter to create rich, fertile soil atop the lake. It's a system that cycles nutrients naturally, a far cry from the chemical-heavy farming of the future you've heard about. There's a strange satisfaction in knowing your garden is both ancient and surprisingly sustainable. You pause, finger-tracing patterns in the dirt. A faint bubbling sound catches your attention. A small spring you hadn't noticed before, just at the edge of your plot. The water trickles up from the lake bed, cool and clear. You realise this tiny natural fountain could be a secret source of nourishment for your plants. Historians still argue whether such springs were deliberately incorporated into Chinampa design or just happy accidents. You suspect the Aztec gardeners didn't leave much to chance. They knew every ripple, every root, every whisper of water. The sun climbs higher, and you feel the first real heat of the day. You pause your work to enjoy a simple meal. Corn tortillas, some beans, and a handful of fresh flowers picked from your patch. The taste of earth and sun fills your mouth, grounding you. In the afternoon, a curious visitor arrives. A small boy from a neighbouring Chinampa, eyes wide with wonder at your new plants. He asks questions with the kind of unfiltered enthusiasm only children have. Will the new seeds make magic flowers? Will the frogs talk to them? You laugh softly and tell him that maybe, just maybe, if you listen closely you can hear the plants whisper. He nods seriously and asks if he can come back tomorrow to hear the whispers with you. As the day winds down, you feel a deep sense of connection to your plot, to the lake, and to the gardeners who came before you. Planting seeds isn't just about growth, it's about hope, tradition, and the quiet promise that life will find a way. The frog figurine seems to wink as the sun sets, and you wonder if it knows something you don't. Evening slips in like a slow tide, the sky folding into soft purples and deep blues. You settle onto your hammock, the woven fibres creaking gently as you sway above the Chinampa's surface. The water below mirrors the stars, twinkling faintly like a scattered treasure chest. The night brings a chorus of sounds, the croak of frogs, the distant call of an owl, the occasional splash of a fish chasing its dinner. It's a lullaby woven from the very pulse of the lake. Your thoughts drift to the social life of Chinamperos. These floating gardens aren't just isolated plots, they're part of a vibrant community. You remember the bustling markets where you traded crops for pottery, feathers, and the occasional sweet cacao treat. Everyone had a role, a rhythm, and a story. Neighbours leaned on each other, sharing tools, advice, and stories beneath the shade of willow trees. Festivals marked the cycles of planting and harvest, moments when music, dance, and laughter floated over the water as freely as the boats. You recall one quirky tradition you overheard. Some gardeners believed that if you whispered your hopes into the soil at night, the plants would grow faster, fed by the power of dreams. It sounds a bit like modern-day wishful thinking, but there's something poetic about it. Historians still argue whether these rituals were widespread or just charming local customs, but you like to think they kept the spirit alive, a little magic stirring beneath the practical. Your mind wanders to the everyday challenges too. Seasonal flooding could wash away months of hard work, and droughts made the soil thirsty and stubborn. You think about how your ancestors adapted, learning to read the lake's moods like a sailor reads the stars. You pull a blanket tighter around your shoulders as a cool breeze drifts by, carrying the scent of wet reeds and distant firewood smoke. You feel a quiet gratitude for this balance, between nature's generosity and its demands. Some nights, you dream vividly of giant cormorants diving beneath your Chinampa, their glossy feathers flashing like dark arrows. Other times, the lake's surface turns glassy and still, and you hear a soft voice calling your name from the depths. You chuckle to yourself. Surely that's just the frogs playing tricks. As you let your eyes close, you hum the tune from the festival again, a reminder that even the oldest gardens are alive with stories, songs, and a stubborn will to thrive. Tomorrow, you know, you'll rise and tend to your floating farm once more, part of an endless dance between water, earth, and sky. The morning sun spreads like warm honey over the lake, dappling the surface with golden light. You step into your canoe, the wooden hull creaking softly beneath you. Today feels different, like the air itself hums with a quiet urgency. You paddle toward the market district, where Chinamperos gather to sell their bounty. The floating gardens are far from secluded. Their fruits, vegetables, and flowers fuel the bustling capital city, feeding thousands every day. The market is alive with chatter, colourful stalls, and the smell of fresh maize tortillas mingling with chili and roasted cacao. You weave through the crowd, your arms heavy with baskets brimming with squash, beans, and the small miracle of your newly sprouted amaranth. Merchants shout out prices and barter with practiced ease. A vendor offers you a handful of bright red chilies, teasing that they'll make your tongue dance a flamenco. You laugh, remembering the last time you underestimated a chili's bite and regretted it for hours. Amid the hubbub, you spot an old woman sitting quietly by the water's edge, weaving reeds into small figurines. She beckons you over and shows you a tiny frog, carved delicately and painted with faded colours. It's a perfect match for your garden's guardian. She tells you the story behind these charms, how each one is believed to trap a little bit of luck and fertility. You exchange one of your squash for the frog, a silent agreement sealing your shared connection to the lake's magic. The woman also mentions a curious new threat: algae blooms creeping into the canals, darkening the water and choking the roots beneath. You frown, thinking about the delicate balance of life beneath your chinampa. If the algae spreads, it could be devastating. Scientists today still debate whether these blooms were natural cycles or early signs of environmental stress caused by urban growth. You wonder how much the Aztecs noticed, or if their deep respect for the lake helped them stave off disaster. Back on your canoe, you paddle slowly, watching the water's surface for signs of trouble. A few patches of green float by, but the lake's vastness still holds its breath. You think about the delicate work required to keep your chinampa thriving, not just planting and harvesting, but guarding against unseen threats. Your fingers brush over the water, feeling its cool pulse. In the fading light, the market's noise softens and the city's shadows stretch long. You tuck your baskets close, a quiet resolve settling over you. The floating farms are more than gardens. They're lifelines woven with care and determination. You imagine future gardeners taking up the task, learning from your hands and those before you, tending this fragile paradise on water. As night falls, you gaze up at the stars reflected in the lake. The same stars your ancestors watched as they dreamed of floating farms that could feed an empire. The lake is calm as you begin your final rounds before nightfall, the water glowing softly under a crescent moon. The gentle lapping of waves against your chinampa blends with the quiet rustle of leaves and the occasional distant call of a night bird. It feels like the world is holding its breath wrapped in a soft embrace. You check each corner of your plot, making sure the young plants you nurtured from the Xochimilco seeds are settled and safe. Their delicate leaves flutter faintly in the night breeze, and you imagine them dreaming alongside you, growing stronger in the stillness. Your thoughts drift to the vast legacy of the Aztec gardeners, the ingenuity behind chinampas that allowed a civilization to flourish against the odds. These floating farms weren't just about food, they were a testament to human creativity, patience, and harmony with nature. You remember the frog figurines, the hummingbirds, the ancient rituals whispered in the soil, and the lively markets alive with chatter and colours. Every detail you encountered feels like a thread in a rich tapestry, woven across centuries and shimmering with life. Historians still argue about many things: how exactly chinampas were first invented, how they balance sustainability with expansion, and how their lessons might apply to our modern world, facing its own ecological challenges. As you lie back in your hammock, the night cool and comforting around you, you feel a deep connection to the past and a quiet hope for the future. The floating gardens have weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, and they continue to thrive, quietly teaching us about resilience and care. Outside, the lake reflects a sky full of stars, each one a tiny spark of light in the vast darkness. The water's surface shimmers gently, like the pulse of an ancient heart. You close your eyes, breathing in the night air, letting the soft sounds lull you deeper into calm. The lake's story is yours now, a gentle current flowing through time. Sleep comes softly, like a warm wave, and you drift away, carried by the quiet magic of floating farms. You feel the weight of the day gently lift from your shoulders as your breath slows and deepens. The distant sounds of water and night creatures fade into a peaceful hush, leaving only the soft rhythm of your own heartbeat. The Chinampa, this floating patch of earth and life, rocks gently beneath you. steady and calm. Imagine yourself lying there, cradled by the water and the stars, the cool night air brushing your skin like a whispered promise. The lake holds its secrets close, but it shares its tranquility freely. Your thoughts grow quieter, slower, drifting like leaves on a slow-moving stream. There is nothing to do now but rest, knowing that beneath the surface life continues its timeless dance, growing, changing, enduring. Your garden sleeps, but tomorrow it will wake again, vibrant and full of promise. Let your eyelids grow heavy, your muscles soften, and your mind settle into this serene moment. The story of the floating farms wraps around you like a gentle lullaby, carrying you into a night filled with quiet dreams and calm. Now, dim the lights once more and allow the soft background hum to carry you deeper into sleep. Sweet dreams.